Hello, party people on the internet. Viva Frei, former Montreal litigator turned Florida rumbler, in Canada for the holidays. I'm not saying the weather out here is dreary. I'm just saying I've been here for darn near a week now, and I haven't seen the sun in a week. I mean, it's up there somewhere above the clouds. I just haven't seen it in going on 7 days. And I'm telling you something, I came down with a cold, probably started before we left. But I think the absence of sun has certainly exacerbated the cold. All right, didn't come here to listen to me complain about how I feel and the weather, although I'm going to do it anyhow. This is an update in the Project Veritas case, the one involving Ashley Biden's allegedly stolen diary. This goes all the way back to 2021. You'll recall two very big stories back in the day. One was Hunter Biden's laptop from hell, which we were told by intelligence officers, etc., was Russian disinformation or bore the earmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. Ironically enough, everything the intelligence was telling us was a Russian disinformation-esque campaign. The other big story at the time, which we were told was also a bunk fake story, Ashley Biden's diary. From the pathological liars, fake news fact checkers at Snopes, did White House, FBI, or DOJ, quote, confirm, end quote, authenticity of Ashley Biden's diary? Plenty of evidence and reporting suggests it is likely real, but that doesn't mean the government has publicly stated an opinion on it. Now, for those of you who don't remember, at some point in 2020, 2021, alleged news of an alleged Ashley Biden diary that was allegedly abandoned at some halfway house, I want to say, in Florida, surfaced. The diary, which Project Veritas at the time decided not to publish, contained some salacious stories of how Joe Biden, now President Joe Biden, would shower with then young teenage Ashley Biden, and it left her with lifelong psychological scars. At first, people thought the diary was fake, or we were told the diary was fake, and then after Project Veritas was charged with participating in theft of property or conspiracy to commit interstate theft, whatever the charges were, it became clear that the diary was in fact authentic, and Project Veritas, no good deed goes unpunished, might as well have just run the story in the first place. They ultimately chose not to publish the story. This is Project Veritas. From an article in Intelligencer, will Ashley Biden's diary take down Project Veritas? After a decade of punking liberals with hidden camera stings, James O'Keefe becomes the story. Later on in the article, the phone call convinced Project Veritas the diary was real. Still, O'Keefe hesitated to publish it. Although Project Veritas never used the diary, it paid a total of $40,000 to Harris and Kurlander. Those are the two people who allegedly stole it. The money was evenly split between them, and the final payment was made on October 24, the same day National File published its first story. It got leaked elsewhere, and now it's public knowledge for anybody who cares to look into it. But it led to criminal charges being laid against members of former Project Veritas, James O'Keefe and two other journalists, seizure of cell phones, computers, etc., on the basis that, get this, Project Veritas journalists conspired with the two culprits in this case, the ones who apparently discovered Ashley Biden's diary, conspired to commit interstate theft. From the court order itself, 1, conspiracy to transport stolen property across state lines and possess stolen goods. 2, interstate transportation of stolen property. 3, possession of stolen goods. 4, aiding and abetting. 5, accessory after the fact. And 6, misprision of felony in violation of 18 U.S.C., and so on and so forth. I'm now convinced this was a setup from day one. These people were bad faith actors looking to screw James O'Keefe and Project Veritas through this absolute setup of a job where they would find however they got Ashley Biden's diary, go give it to Project Veritas, and then the authorities would be able to come in and allege conspiracy to commit interstate commerce. So the two individuals allegedly found Ashley Biden's diary. I'm going to say allegedly so much. Allegedly? If you don't know what that video is, link the meme right now.
And apparently, I've never been on live television before. Apparently, sometimes I don't watch this because I'm a kid, and apparently Grandpa just gives me a remote after we watch the Powerball.
Allegedly found this diary at a halfway house in Florida. They open it up and they say, oh, look at this. It's Ashley Biden's diary and some other personal stuff. Let's contact Project Veritas and see if they're interested in acquiring this, publishing it, running with it. You know, sort of like an inside scoop that Joe Biden, in addition to having, for whatever the reason, a son that became crippled by drug addiction, prostitution addiction, alleged interstate sex trafficking, and all sorts of other stuff, has another kid, Ashley Biden, who has lifelong scars because of allegedly improper behavior when she was a kid and Joe Biden was an adult, allegedly showering with her. Okay. From an article in the New York Post, the Ashley Biden diary is the most recent example of a blanket media blackout, a July 2019 excerpt going viral 2 weeks ago. Read this and defend it as non-newsworthy. Quote, was I molested, end quote, the author writes. Quote, I think so. I can't remember specifics, but I do remember trauma. Hypersexualized at a young age. I remember being somewhat sexualized with Caroline. I remember having sex with friends at a young age. Showers with my dad, probably not appropriate, end quote. She also wrote that she was in treatment for, quote, sexual trauma, end quote. They make the drop. Project Veritas gets this diary and ultimately says, we're not publishing it. And then from what I recall at the time, tried to get it back to the people who gave it to them, to their attorneys, and nobody would want to take it. From an article in the New York Times, O'Keefe said that his group could not authenticate the diary and made an, quote, ethical, end quote, decision to not publish it. He said that Project Veritas gave the diary to, quote, law enforcement, end quote, and attempted to return it to a lawyer representing Ms. Biden, who he said, quote, refused to authenticate it, end quote. The two people who gave them the diary, who allege or were allegedly remunerated $20,000 to go travel to New York to give them the diary, pleaded guilty. They pleaded guilty to interstate theft or whatever the heck the charges were, which is very interesting because to the extent that they pleaded guilty, now it's going to make it a lot easier to go after Project Veritas. Their sentences, by the way, they pleaded guilty. The prosecution is recommending 6-month house arrest, so they're not going to see a day in jail. From an article in the New York Times, prosecutors have recommended a sentence of 6 months home confinement and 3 years of supervised release while having Ms. Harris forfeit the $20,000 that Project Veritas paid her for the diary and other materials. Mr. Kurlander, who also received $20,000 from Project Veritas, is scheduled to be sentenced next month. Each faces up to 5 years in prison. So they have pleaded guilty, copped a sweetheart deal that will not see one day in jail, and meanwhile, Project Veritas journalists, James O'Keefe and 2 others, are being persecuted to the full extent of the law. What happens? Well, FBI, intelligence, government says, we have reason to believe that there was theft afoot. Conspiracy to commit theft and interstate transportation of stolen goods. They go get a warrant based on affidavits from a Judge Cave to go seize Project Veritas cell phones, computers, etc. They go seize it. And James O'Keefe and the other journalists allege First Amendment protections, journalistic protections, solicitor-client protections. The court appoints a special master, which is supposed to go through, do the triage, see what is solicitor-client privilege, allegedly, if the privilege doesn't apply anymore. So they get a special master who documents all of the information on the cell phones, computers, etc. They find that there's some non-responsive materials on the phones. There's some solicitor-client privilege stuff, but they'll find a way to get around that. And James O'Keefe basically contests that warrant, contests everything in there. And Judge, what's her name? What happened? You're taking the girls shopping, and I'll take the boys hiking? Do you know what the name of the judge is? Analisa Torres. My wife knew it. They get Judge Analisa Torres to review the court proceedings. And Judge Analisa Torres, who's a good judge as far as I'm concerned, and she's so good that I think that this court order is not going to get overturned should James O'Keefe et al. Decide to appeal it. All right, Judge Analisa Torres was appointed by Obama and went to Harvard. Now I'm second-guessing everything I ever thought I thought about this judge. Basically finds a way to say your First Amendment journalistic rights have not been violated. Solicitor-client privilege has not been violated because there's the exception to commit a crime. And basically, the warrant as issued by Cave and the special master determinations as to all of this information will remain ratified. It's an amazing thing. First Amendment journalistic protections. James O'Keefe et al. Alleged confidentiality. That a journalist doesn't have to divulge their sources. They can't be compelled to. And even going back to the Pentagon Papers, when what was going to be published was top secret material. You could publish it, and you could not be prior restrained not to publish it, to the extent that the journalist publishing it did not partake in the theft or misappropriation of the information. That was the Pentagon Papers' bottom line. How do you get around that? Just allege that they had something to do with the misappropriation, improper procurement of the documents itself. So they're going after Project Veritas saying, we don't believe that these people just came to you to give you the information. We believe that you participated in, solicited the theft of the documents. Therefore, none of these protections apply. A very creative way that Judge Analisa Torres got around confidentiality, journalistic sources. They said, look, these 2 people who gave you this stuff, they don't want to protect their anonymity. They don't want to protect their confidentiality. They already pleaded guilty. And they're going to get sentenced. If it hasn't already happened, it's going to be sooner than later. So there's nothing to protect in terms of their confidentiality. So your journalistic protecting your sources doesn't apply. From Judge Torres' court order, here petitioners promised to keep the identities of Harris and Kurlander confidential. But Harris and Kurlander pleaded guilty and revealed to the public that they were the ones who provided the victim's journal and additional items to Project Veritas. Petitioners, therefore, are not, quote, protecting the identity of any source, end quote. It's phenomenal because it's like Chief Wiggum said in The Simpsons. The law is helpless to protect you, but it's not helpless to punish you.
I thought you said the law was powerless.
It's powerless to help you, not punish you. Earned my treat.
So they say, no, your First Amendment rights, as far as confidentiality goes, don't apply because the sources have outed themselves. There's nothing to protect. First Amendment protections don't apply if you're participating in the scheme. If you're participating, soliciting, paying someone to steal something, well, then you're not just a journalist. You're partaking in a crime, which gets us to how they're going to get around solicitor-client privilege. You presume that James O'Keefe consulted his attorney at the time and says, look, these people just came to us with this. Can we publish it lawfully? And there's going to be solicitor-client privilege that no one is within their rights to know unless we no longer live in a free and democratic society. How does Judge Analisa Torres get around that? Participation in a crime exception. From the judge's ruling, like the New York Times journalists, petitioners are not, quote, passive collectors of information whose evidence is a convenient means for the government, end quote, to further its investigation. Indeed, their actions are not only, quote, central to, end quote, the government's investigation, but are the subject of the investigation itself. The crime fraud exception applies to communications, quote, intended in some way to facilitate or to conceal the criminal activity, end quote. The communication must, quote, itself be in furtherance of the crime or fraud, end quote, and not only provide evidence of a crime or fraud. The court must find a, quote, purposeful nexus, end quote, between the attorney-client communication and the crime or fraud. If a criminal is consulting his attorney saying, look, how do I deal these drugs without getting caught? Well, that's not solicitor-client privilege that is privileged in the legal sense. That is participating, conspiring with your lawyer to break the law, and therefore solicitor-client privilege doesn't apply to that. And that's how they got around the solicitor-client privilege in this case. Bottom line, there's no journalistic protection anymore. If they don't like you as a journalist, if you are a disfavored journalist, they will find any way to come after you, even if it means, in my humble opinion, setting this up from the get-go. These two people who found the diary, however the hell they got the diary, I am convinced they did this to set up, frame, and take down James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. But lo and behold, Project Veritas found a way of taking itself down in the interim. But they consult them, and now they plead a deal that says, oh yeah, we conspired with Project Veritas to steal this. Just don't send us to jail. What a convenient plea deal that is. It's almost like the people who, maybe they stole it in the first place. Maybe they did. Almost like they now get to plead their way out of jail and take down Project Veritas, James O'Keefe, and the other journalists at the same time. Amazing. And all the government has to do is allege partaking in a criminal activity. All protections out the window. Journalistic protections out the window. Solicitor-client privileges out the window. What a happy coincidence that you can use the powers of the law to protect the people that you want to protect and utterly screw the disfavored people that you want to screw. We'll see. I don't know if they're going to appeal it. I predict that even if they do, it's going to be a tough decision to overturn because Judge Analisa Torres motivated the decision in such a way that even if I vehemently disagree with it, I understand the rationale. And on a fact-based pattern, it's going to be hard for any higher court to say, yeah, I disagree with what she said. That's it. They will find a way to screw you one way or the other. With that said, enjoy the beautiful surroundings. I'm sure the sun will come out eventually, when it goes down.